Hello friends, and welcome back to another video. I have a lot of changes that have happened recently. You probably can't tell by the background, but I have moved, and there will be some vlogs for that coming very soon. I've just finished editing all of those and was getting ready to start getting them scheduled for posting when I realized it is a new month and I have yet to finish a wrap-up for the month of October, which is something that I said I was going to try to do as a more regular video, because I don't really do TBRs because I found that I am not the best with planning out what I want to read. I'm very much more of a mood reader, but I can definitely commit to telling you guys what I did read in the month. So that is what this video is going to be. And this month was not a very big reading month for me at all. It was a very busy month with the whole move. We are closer to a lot more things. More specifically, Barnes & Nobles is literally right down the street for me. And really and truly, I'm loving right now the view that I get from the apartment. But I'm excited to get into the books that I read for the month of October. So I read a total of 5 books in this month, which is not that much for me in comparison. Although technically one I have not quite finished, but I'm very nearly at the end. But we'll start off with the first book that I read this month. This month I got into my Stephen King era, and I started with The Mist. I was originally going to read the entirety of Skeleton Crew, but I realized very quickly that I can see Skeleton Crew being really great to kind of break up reads. So like if I needed like a palate cleanser, I would go back to Skeleton Crew and like maybe read another short story and then pick up another book and go back and forth that way. So I decided for the sake of it, I was gonna go ahead and just read The Mist, and then I would venture out and see some of the other books that he had. So I read The Mist. I gave that one actually a 3 stars. So that one wasn't my absolute favorite. I think that I had a hard time with that one. No, this one was an audiobook. I had a hard time with this one because it was an audiobook, and I think I found for him I need to physically read the book, or if I'm going to read the audiobook, then I also need to follow along with the book. Just the way how he tells his stories, I think, is way more engaging if you're actually reading it. So that one, I think, was a little bit harder for me to really get into. But overall, I did like it, and I found that his writing is really fantastic. I thought that the story was pretty fast-paced. And yeah, overall, I enjoyed it. The next book that I read was the buddy read that I have with my friend Jessica, and I had actually picked The Assistant to the Villain for October. I just thought it was a good fit. It's kind of got like almost this fantasy element, although it's not necessarily fantasy. And the fact that we've got like this bad guy or a villain, it just felt very like fall-esque. And I've been seeing it pretty much everywhere and just kind of wanted to see what the hype was about. So I decided to pick it up, and I thought she would enjoy it too. This one I did enjoy. It wasn't my favorite either, but then again, I'm not really sure if that was due to a reading slump. So I would love to go back and revisit it and then pick up the second book. But I gave this one a 3 stars. It was fun. It was a cute story. It felt like a story that had already been done before, though. And I think I was kind of wanting and hoping for more. It just didn't land. There were definitely some moments towards the end where I was like, oh my gosh, or like, oh my gosh, like I totally saw that coming, but at the same time, I'm completely shocked. Because I had my suspicions about certain things, but overall, I really did enjoy the book. It's just not something that it didn't land the way that I thought it was going to land, but I'm just not sure if that's because of the fact that I was going through this reading slump or if it was just not that good. And I think it may have been more the reading slump than anything, because I still think about the book. I can still, somewhat remember the characters, and there's something that wants me to read the second book. So I don't think that it was necessarily the book itself, although there were things, like I said, that felt kind of flat. It felt like a story that had been done before and just kind of cliche in a way. And yeah, but overall, good book. The next book that I read in the month of October was another Stephen King. Stephen King took it away this month. But that was Carrie. So this was the physical read that I picked up. This book is so small. Look, it's so tiny. I've never actually seen this cover of the book, but I liked it. This is one of the books that we picked up from a store that was closing in the mall that sold toys and books and all those other things, and like the sales were insane. So we picked up pretty much the majority of our Stephen King books from there. But this one I loved. This is definitely, I've heard from others that this is not his best work, but I actually really, really enjoyed this book. This one revolves around, obviously, our main character, Carrie, who is a young lady in high school. Essentially, she is kind of like this strange girl that she does, like, nobody really kind of interacts with. Her mom is also very, very very weird and extremely religious. So I think that it was always very hard for Carrie to kind of fit in her town. And basically things go down and we find out a lot about Carrie. We find out a lot more about Carrie. And she's basically a lot more than meets the eye. And yeah, if you're familiar with the story of Carrie, because it's obviously been out for quite some time and they've made some movies about it, then you may already know what happens, but I don't want to spoil too much. This one, though, I did really, really love, and I gave this one a 4.5 stars. I did enjoy this. It was very fast-paced for me, and I think it helped that I had seen the movie before I had read the book. I'd seen the remake when it came out quite a few years back, so I already had an idea of the storyline and what was going to happen, so it felt very easy to follow along and read. And I liked how his stories are written. So they're not written like normal chapter-based books. So basically he sections them off into parts. So like the first part is just like, okay, part one, and this is kind of, what is going to entail in this part. And then you go into part two. So part one and part two are probably the longer parts, but I think part one is probably the longest. But this is how big part one is. And then you've got your part two, and then part three is very, very small. And it's only sectioned off into 3 parts. It's not like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. However, he does kind of section them off in a sense. So like there will be like a break, and then here starts another part of the story, and then a break, and then we go into the next part of the story. And I really liked that way of storytelling, and I'm finding it to be something that he does in his books from what I'm seeing. I imagine that's how The Mist would have been if I was reading it physically, but I did not, so I'm not 100% sure about that. But so far the books that I've read physically of his seem to be kind of chopped up into those parts. All right, so the next book that I read in the month of October was House on the Cerulean Sea. I was holding off on, I had bought this book like at the beginning of the year, but I was holding off because I just felt like this was going to be a fall read. It seemed like it would be a very cozy, magical read, just from what I read from the synopsis, and I was 100% right about that. This book I fell in love with. I fell in love with the characters. I fell in love with the magic. I fell in love with just the story in general. I just enjoyed the fact that this kind of revolved around like this gentleman who His name is Linus, I believe, and he just is this lonely, like lonesome guy. He's kind of like a loner, if you will, but like he kind of like keeps to himself. He goes to work every day. He does the best that he can at his job. And his job is essentially like kind of like this caseworker, and he goes around to all these different homes for magical children, essentially, and basically goes there to see whether or not they are a danger to, human society, and whether or not it is safe to keep them around. And he gets put on this assignment, and when he goes and gets put on this assignment, he goes to what they call upper management, which I thought was so simple but sweet. And they put him on this assignment, and he has to go out to the house on the Cerulean Sea and essentially do his job, make sure whether or not these children are safe to be around. And I thought that was fun. The magical elements that were involved in it were fun. All of the characters were fun and sweet and adorable, and I just I can see them. It's, even though it is fictional, I felt like I could see these characters. They felt three-dimensional, and almost like you could physically see this world and these people in this house. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed that book. It took me a little bit of time to read it, but I ended up finishing the last chunk of it really, really quickly in one sitting. This to me feels like something that I could read in at least a day. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading the next book. I know that there's a book that came out pretty recently, so I want to read that and just kind of see what that one is all about. But I don't know if I gave the star rating yet. I gave that one a 5 stars. I very much enjoyed it. And there's a little bit of a love story element that's mixed into it, which I really loved. It didn't feel pushy or anything like that. It just felt like it was very finely interwoven in the story and the plot, and it worked out great. So I loved that book. But the reason why I rushed to finish this book was because a book that I have been waiting to read for quite some time, and the one book that brought Stephen King to the forefront of my mind as an author to pick up and read, was this book here, 11/22/63. I have been wanting to read this book for a long time, and I finally said, you know what? October is the month. I'm going to start reading Stephen King, and as a celebratory gift to myself, I'm going to go to Barnes & Noble's after we move, and I'll pick up the book. I actually picked up the book the weekend before we moved, and I started it that same day. That's why I rushed to finish House on the Cerulean Sea, because I was like, I just don't think I can wait anymore. This is a thick one. This is a big boy, and I'm not quite finished with this one yet. So this would be the 5th book, and I'm almost done. So technically I haven't wrapped it up in October, but I read most of this in October. But yeah, so this is all that I have left. This book is not his biggest. Correct me if I'm wrong, because anybody that is a Stephen King fan may know better than I would, but I think it might be one of his biggest ones. This one is only 849 pages. Only 849 pages. It is a very, very big book, but this story is so good. It essentially revolves around our main character. His name is Jake, and he is in present day. I think it's 2011, I think, for him in the book. But he lives in this town, and this gentleman that lives in the town who owns a diner basically calls him up. His name is Al. He calls him up and he's like, hey, Jake, I need you to come down to the diner immediately. And he meets up with Al, and Al is like, hey, I'm going to tell you something. You're going to think this is crazy, but the best way for you to kind of understand what I'm saying is you just have to experience it. And he takes him and he goes to this place. I will not say much because I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but essentially he finds out that there's this time traveling aspect that Al has been partaking in for quite some time. And none of this is really a spoiler. It's pretty much what is spelled out on the back in the synopsis. But long story made short, he is time traveling back, and the whole purpose is to try time travel back to 11/22/63 to try and stop the JFK assassination. And I was really eager to read this book because I wanted to see how the time travel was going to work. I wanted to see like how the story was going to take place. Like, is he just going to keep going back and back and back until he is able to save him? Like, how is this story going to get told? It doesn't give you a whole lot. You just kind of have to see how it's going to play out, right? So, all I can say is that this book has definitely been worth the wait and very much an enjoyable book. I do not want to give away too much, but I am going to share some of the notes that I took because I put down some notes on my phone. So here are some of my thoughts. First thing, biggest thing, all of the characters in this feel very three-dimensional. They feel like they are real people, and I keep almost getting confused because it is such a historical based book that I almost am like, but were these people real? Did this actually happen? Like, that's kind of how I feel when I'm reading it. I have to keep trying to remind myself that even though history is very much interwoven in this book, it is a fictional book, and Jake and all these other characters aren't necessarily real people. So it is something, though, that I find really, really fascinating and amazing when I pick up a book and these books really kind of come to life and the characters jump off of the page. And he does this very, very well in this book. Honestly, so far, all the books that I've read from him, he does that pretty well. Another thing, like I said, is this is very much mixed and interwoven with history, of course, because it is taking place at a time where a very big historical event happened. And obviously there are characters that are in here that were real. So I think that is actually pretty cool to kind of see that and learn a little bit, even though it may be very loosely based off of real historical events. But I loved that. I also really loved the fact that the time travel was very simple. I wasn't sure if it was going to be something crazy, like he's going to go in a time machine, like he opens up a freezer, now he's in a time machine, and poof, he's like in the future. It's nothing like that. It is very, very simple and something that you would just have to read to find out for yourself, because I don't want to spoil that for anyone. But it was so simple yet effective and interesting all at the same time. And I think like the one question I still have, and I don't want to spoil anything, but one question I still have, and I guess I'll find out at the end, is the time aspect. So you'll find out if you read the book, but Al kind of explains how time works in the present day when you are time traveling. And so our main character has been in this one place for a little while. So I'm wondering, is the time element still the same? I don't know. I still have some questions that need answered. And I'm either going to finish this book today or tomorrow. I'm not really sure. But I am so happy that I have picked it up. Also, really impressed with myself for picking up a Stephen King book that is also almost 900 pages and being able to read that and fully enjoying it. So I can definitely say I am finding a very, very big love for Stephen King, and he has got a very prominent space on our bookshelf now. And I think I won't do it this year, but I think next year I will probably pick up this guy. We did just finish watching the original movie last night, which I'd never seen, and that one was crazy. Graphics were horrendous, but that is to be expected based off of when it was filmed. But yeah, it is a good movie, and Stephen Curry, I think is his name, who plays it in that one. He plays that role very, very well. So yeah, anyways, that is it. Those are all the books that I read this month, and yeah, I'm excited for what is to come in the month of November. I've already started a couple of books, and we will see what we get up to then. But stay tuned, guys, because in the next upcoming vlogs, you are going to be seeing the entire moving process and what that looked like. And yeah, I will catch you guys in the next video. Thank you guys so much. Bye!